All right, there we go. Okay, well, it is time to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Jaws, the greatest movie ever made, question mark. I probably should have done a better job marketing this seminar because I definitely want to talk about Jaws and why I think it's awesome, and why I think it is a great movie. And so we're going to have a bit of a Jaws rant of why I think this is a great movie. But we're also going to talk about some storytelling techniques that Jaws, the film here, employs that we can use when we are running games, when we're being the dungeon master, when we're the game master, or when we're writing stories, or whatever we're doing, some kind of storytelling pursuit like that. So I really hope you guys enjoy it today. Like I said, everybody is force muted. That is just so we don't get interrupted, and you can type questions into chat, and we will go ahead here and get started. All right, so first off, my name is Matt. I am a writer, I'm a podcaster, I'm a game master. I publish a lot of role-playing game resource books that help you play Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games. Everything of mine can be found at dicegeeks.com. And so pretty much that is all of that stuff. And what I wanted to talk about with Jaws, like I said, greatest movie ever made. Maybe it is. Maybe it is the greatest movie ever made, right? But I wanted to bring up a few issues because sometimes, when we talk about great movies, there usually seems to be something they all have in common. And this is something that I just kind of always ask myself, it's like, why do all great stories have to be about family drama or crime? Have you ever noticed that? Some of the greatest movies ever made, right? People talk about that. Greatest novels, they always talk about, somebody getting a divorce, a murder, or something like that. Why does it always have to be, a family drama or crime? Why can't it be something else? Why can't a story be about something else to be considered great? And with that said, of course, here, obviously, we have some of the greatest movies ever made, right? These are usually, considered some of the best, right? Citizen Kane is ranked usually the best. Casablanca comes in second, and then Sunset Boulevard is usually like, 10 in the top 10 or something like that. And now, just to be clear, right? Citizen Kane is a brilliant movie, right? It's a brilliantly made film. It is amazing in a number of ways. But it's, I mean, this might be cinema sacrilege or something, but it's kind of boring, right? It's, you have to work at it a little bit. Casablanca, on the other hand, is vastly entertaining. But, okay. Sunset Boulevard, I think Sunset Boulevard probably has no mistakes in it whatsoever, right? There's just not an error in that film, from down to the tiniest little bit to everything. Everything's perfect. The cast is perfect. The filming's perfect. I think it's an error-free film. So what's the problem with these? Why do I say maybe Jaws should nudge up a little closer to these movies? And that's because they all require quite a bit of cultural and historical context to really understand. And, and I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing or that you shouldn't do that. I think you should learn some of the cultural and historical context to understand really what's going on in Citizen Kane, right? About the Hearst papers and things like that. I think it becomes a vastly more interesting film when you look into that historical and and cultural context. Same thing with Casablanca, right? You can watch Casablanca and just only know a little bit about, the Second World War and still come away with it, but you miss some things, right? If you miss when the people are fleeing and they get shot in front of the big portrait, and we don't know if we don't know that that is a portrait of Pétain, right? We don't know that historical and cultural context behind that. We lose something in the movie, right? Same thing with Sunset Boulevard, right? You can watch it, it's an entertaining film, but if you know the history of old Hollywood, if you know something about the silent era, if you know who Erich von Stroheim is, your appreciation of this film goes up like 100 notches, right? And so what I'm just kind of saying is that, you know, we need to know actually quite a bit before we can really just appreciate some of these movies. And like I said, I'm for people taking the time to learn that so they can appreciate them, because that is valuable. So I'm not against that by any stretch of the imagination. All I am really saying here is that Jaws doesn't need any of that, right? You don't really need any cultural or historical background. You can watch Jaws and you can get scared out of your wits just knowing, oh, well, it looks like it takes place in the 70s. You don't need to know some of that historical and cultural context, right? Because it's all there. It's just, here is the movie the way it is. Citizen Kane, you need to learn some stuff before you watch it. Especially if you learn, say, Citizen Kane, if you learn what deep focus is and some of the cinematography that they use, your appreciation for that movie goes way up as well. Casablanca, history of the World War II, the French, the Vichy government, all that stuff. If you know some of that stuff, oh my gosh, right? Your appreciation goes up. Sunset Boulevard, like I mentioned, if you know Hollywood, if you know the silent era, again, your just appreciation just goes up for those movies. But Jaws stands on its own. It just stands right there. You don't have to look up anything. You don't have to do that. You just turn Jaws on, you just press play or wherever you're watching it, and you can just enjoy it as it is. And so that's what I think is a very powerful thing about a movie, right? That you can just turn it on and press play, and you can just enjoy it for what it is right there without, spending a lot of time looking into things. But I'm not against that. We should definitely learn the context of movies like Citizen Kane and Casablanca and Sunset Boulevard. But I think Jaws just kind of stands on its own. Now, there are some interesting things here about Jaws. And I know some of this might be common knowledge. Again, I'm not like a film historian or anything. I'm just really fascinated in film. I studied film in college. I studied film on my own. I was an independent filmmaker. I didn't get very far. I tried my best to do things like this, but I am always fascinated about cinema and storytelling and how it helps us play role-playing games, which I think is important. Just some trivia here, right? Jaws was this novel, right? It's going to come out. The novel was going to be released. Well, Richard Zanuck and his producing partner David Brown pick up the screen rights for the novel. The novel hasn't been released yet, but they pick up the screen rights because it's probably going to be. They think, oh well, this will be a good movie, a fun movie, or whatever. And the problem or the issue becomes, when the novel hits, it becomes an automatic #1 New York Times bestseller. It just jumps right to the top of the charts. They are kind of blown away by it. This is an awesome gift to them, right? Because now this is built-in marketing for them, right? You got a best-selling book, and now you have the screen rights, right? You have the movie rights to this book, and you're going to put it out. But it did kind of cause a little contention, from what I understand, between Zanuck and Brown, because they had already assigned the movie to a 26-year-old director named Steven Spielberg. And I forget who it was. One of the producing partners was like, we got this #1 bestseller. We got the movie rights. This is awesome. This is going to be fantastic. But we've assigned it to a 26-year-old director. And one of them was very concerned because they had had a lot of problems in Hollywood with young directors and young filmmakers, some who had immense talent, like Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper, Chris Christopherson. But what was the problem? they were all on drugs, right? And they would flake out and they wouldn't turn in the movie, or the movie would be delayed, or something would happen because they were on drugs. And one of the producing partners was like, oh no, we hired a kid, he's not going to deliver. And the other one, I can't remember which one, Zanuck or one of or Brown, was just like, no, 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 no. This kid doesn't even smoke or drink, and all he does is talk about movies. We'll be okay. And I think little did they know they would be more than okay, because the movie turned out to be so phenomenal. And right now, it sits at number 48 on the AFI's top 100 movies of all time. So it is recognized as being one of the greatest movies ever made, which is very which kind of makes me very happy, because it is recognized. I think maybe you should bump it up a few spots, but it is recognized as being one of the greatest movies of all time, which is awesome, because it is so good. Like I said, it kind of transcends that idea that everything has to be about a family drama, or about marriages and divorces, or about crime in some way. That you can have a movie that is something else, about a giant shark, that is actually recognized as one of the greatest movies ever made. And of course, in 1975, Jaws is a runaway hit. I think it's the first movie to make over $100 million. It becomes kind of the summer blockbuster, right? It sets that template for what a summer blockbuster movie could be. And then from then on, studios were trying, where's my Jaws? Where's my Jaws? Where's my summer movie? Where's my big movie that we can push to? Jaws was that first one, right? It became this huge phenomenon. And I think also there are a couple other things that make Jaws a great movie, because it has done something that some other movies haven't done. And that is pretty much start a couple other genres of movies, right? Jaws not only spawned a number of sequels to itself, but it also spawned some other genres of movies. Giant shark movies. If Jaws hadn't been, if it wasn't around, if it was never released, or it had been a terrible movie instead of an amazing movie, we would not have a genre of giant shark movies, which is pretty healthy and going strong. Now, you can debate the quality of some of those, but it is interesting that Jaws creates a genre. They created a genre. You can make a giant shark movie and people are still watching them, and it wouldn't have happened without Jaws. And then the second one, Animals Gone Mad kind of movies. Now, you can make an argument that Hitchcock's The Birds, which was before Jaws, kind of started some of this. But after Jaws, right, we got a whole bunch of just animals gone mad. Not animals that were genetically mutated or anything like that. Just normal animals that are going crazy and they're killing. And there are movies like Grizzly and all this stuff about bears that just that just goes crazy and stalks people or whatever. And without Jaws, that wouldn't happen. So Jaws has created at least a couple genres of movies in its own right. So that tells me right there that it is a pretty amazing film. And then, just for good measure here, right here is just a sampling of some of the giant shark movies that would not exist if Jaws had not been such an incredible movie, or had not been released at all. And we can see obviously some different names. Some of these are more famous than others. Some are huge budget movies. The Meg, I mean, it had a huge budget. I think it was well over $100 million, if not $200 million budget movie. And then you have smaller budget movies. Some of these like Toxic Shark, and I don't know if there's one on here. Some of those movies are made for a couple $100, which is kind of astounding that you can make a movie like, nowadays for a couple $100. I have seen quite a few of these because I have a problem with shark movies. So I have seen quite a few of these. I have not seen Raiders of the Lost Shark yet, but I applaud the filmmakers for coming up with Raiders of the Lost Shark, because that's a pretty good title. Kudos to that filmmaker. I don't know if the movie's any good. I might check it out just based on the title alone. But to kind of wrap up some of that, I think Jaws is amazing on a number of levels, right? The movie works. It just stands on its own. You can just press play and you can watch it. It's kind of its cultural resonance in that it's created genres or jump-started other genres of movies, I think is a testament to what it is. How many of these movies have parody scenes or homages to Jaws, right? The Meg is almost a remake, right? It's almost a remake, just with a bigger shark. They do so many callbacks to Jaws. It almost gets a little ridiculous at some point. They do so many callbacks, but we'll see when Meg 2 comes out, because there's the sequel coming out. So we'll see if they're continuing to do those Jaws callbacks in the sequel. But so those are some reasons why I think Jaws could be moved higher on the AFI's best movie list, because it is so good in its own right, and because it has spawned so many genres. Not many movies can say that. All right, so storytelling techniques. I apologize. I'm gonna have to take a drink. So storytelling techniques. This is something where, like I said at the beginning, I wish I had done a better job marketing this seminar, because I definitely wanted to spend some time on storytelling techniques to see how we can use some of these techniques that Jaws uses, and how we can use them in our own writing, if we're writers, or in running games. And I think in running games, when we run tabletop role-playing games, we can really use some of these techniques that we see here in Jaws, because it's just such a wonderfully told story, that we can really use some of these techniques to make our stories better, right? I think it has a lot to offer here. So here's a synopsis. Hopefully I'm not giving any spoilers away for Jaws. Hopefully everybody has seen it. I hope everybody's seen it a whole bunch of times. And obviously the story now is so well known. I think what's interesting about this too is that the story now of Jaws is kind of so well known, it's become a cliche, right? The story almost of itself has become a cliche. And I think this is a problem that is enjoyed by other great works as well. And now I'm gonna, maybe another sacrilege thing, but say, when you're in high school and the English lit teacher says, hey, we're going to read Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and you read Romeo and Juliet and you're like, well, I've seen this a million times, right? I've seen I've seen the young lovers from two different houses that are kept apart because of domineering fathers or politics or something like that. I've seen that a million times. It was in a sitcom I watched last night. It was in this cartoon I watched. It was in a movie I watched. And we think, well, Shakespeare isn't exciting. That was cliche. Well, Shakespeare created the cliche, right? Jaws created this cliche of some of these things that we're going to look at here, like, don't close the beaches, keep the beaches open. Jaws created all of these things. And so I'll read the synopsis really quick. This comes from Google. When a young woman is killed by a shark while skinny dipping near the New England tourist town of Amity Island, Police Chief Martin Brody wants to close the beaches, but Mayor Larry Vaughn overrules him, feeling that the loss of tourist revenue will cripple the town. Ichthyologist Matt Hooper and grizzled sea captain Quint offer to help Brody capture the killer beast, and the trio engage in an epic battle of man versus nature. And I thought that was a pretty good description here that I found on Google. And so, like I said, this kind of creates the cliche, right? We want to make sure that we understand that, oh yeah, I've seen this movie before, right? I saw this in this other movie. They wanted to close the beaches, or they wanted to close this, they wanted to close the ski resort, or they wanted to, close the whatever, the boat ramp. I don't know what, they wanted to close something because of a threat out there. Well, this is where it comes from, right? It comes from Jaws. And it was so good that people just started copying it. People just started copying that formula. And so we can see some interesting things here, right, that set up conflict already in the story, right? So a person is killed by a shark. The police chief wants to do the right thing. The mayor says no. Then complications ensue, right? More deaths. An expert comes in, says, no, look, this is a shark, definitely a shark. Then you get the sea captain, right, who's been with sharks, who swam with sharks, right? Who has dealt with sharks like almost his entire adult life, if not his childhood as well. So you start getting, some of these seeds of conflict that you can see here. And if you watch some of the sci-fi original movies, if you watch some of the great, the giant shark movies that are being produced today, and that you will see that they always have one of these elements or multiple of these elements, because that's the template, right? Jaws created the template of the genre, right? This is what you're going to have in your giant shark movie. But what Jaws does really well, right, is since they were setting the template right, they hit so many notes really well that they gave a lot of the characters a really good depth behind them. And this is something that I think people forget about when you talk about a horror movie like Jaws or an action movie or something like that. Some of the movies that started some of those genres and some of this, with Jaws right here, right, it has so much story to it. It has so much drama with Chief Brody and his wife and his children. It is not a stripped down, shell of a movie, right? This is a very robust story filled out with a lot of interesting developments around its characters, and especially its central characters. So we have Chief Brody, right? This is kind of the iconic picture where he like flies up into the frame with this look, because now he's just seen the shark face to face for the first time, because it was right behind the boat and he's just seen it for the first time. But I wanted to talk about his arc, right? And this is like a character arc or a story arc for Chief Brody. At the beginning of the movie, right, we learn that Sheriff Brody is new. He has just taken this job. He's new to the job, and he is new on the job, and he was kind of unsure about taking the job, but now here he is. He's new to the job, so he's the kind of the outsider, right? And then kind of going along with the second point right here, he's new, unknown to the community, right? The mayor, the council people, even the coroner, when the coroner examines the body of the shark attack victim, what do we see? All those people know each other, right? They like went to high school together. They'd known each other for 30, 40 years, right? But here's Chief Brody. He's new and he's got a new job and the mayor is his boss. And this is putting him in a strange position, right? The coroner just goes along with the mayor because, well, they know each other. They're cronies, right? They're buddies. They've known each other 30, 40 years, whatever. They just know each other. But also, not only is he new, he's kind of unknown in the community. He's the outsider to the community. He was unsure about taking this job. He took a job as a chief of police on an island, and he is afraid of the water, right? Chief Brody is afraid of water. And we only get some hints about this, but something happened when he was a child, a boating accident or something, and he is afraid to go in the water. So, I mean, what an incredible story turn here, right? This is a great hook to put into your character, right? He's unsure about taking a new job. He's unknown to the community and he's afraid of water. And now he's on an island and he is going to face a foe that is exclusively in the water, right? This was a great beginning of setting up Chief Brody as a very dynamic character, because what happens by the end? Well, he's totally sure he should have taken this job. He is known to everybody in the community and he is accepted as part of the community, and he overcomes his fear of water, right? So he has a perfect character arc that was incredible, right? Like if you just leave out that detail that he's afraid to go in the water, that just lowers the quality of the movie. It just lowers the tension of the movie by a ton, right? So having him be afraid of the water at the beginning of the movie and having him overcome that is a tremendous thing. A great storytelling. Now, what's interesting about this, I'm talking about the character arc here, and it's a really awesome character arc. In tabletop role-playing games, sometimes it is hard to give a character an arc. Sometimes a player will approach you, you're the game master, you're the dungeon master, and a player will come to you and say, hey, yeah, I got this great idea for a character. Well, he's going to start out and, he's afraid of the water. But then, by the end, I want him to overcome that. And it's going to be this great arc. Well, that doesn't work very well, right? Because we're collaboratively telling a story, right? If you're writing Jaws or you're writing a novel, you can do that. But it's hard to kind of work in a character arc sometimes. But when players are making their characters, is something you can always think about, is to give them a fear, give them something, give them some flaw that maybe through the course of a campaign or sessions, you can really kind of turn that into something, or the game master can start to see that and turn it into something. But it's hard to say, like, this is my arc. This is my arc. In a screenplay, in a novel, you can do that and plan it out, and it's excellent storytelling. In role-playing games can be hard, but just when you make your character, give them some flaws. Give them flaws there at the beginning. Give them some phobias. Give them something. Give them a little something that makes them odd, and you can maybe work in a good arc there later on as the story with game master elements and other player elements, and it's all coming together in your collaborative storytelling. You can kind of work that out. All right, so the shark wouldn't work. So this is probably a famous story by now, but I think it is worth covering because they had an animatronic shark here, right? You can see Spielberg sitting on it. I noticed he doesn't have his trademark beard here, but he's sitting on top of the shark. The animatronic shark wouldn't work very well, right? They would put it in the water and it would start shaking and other things, and it made some of the footage just unusable. So what he was forced to do in this case is then not show the shark through like the first half or more than half of the movie. And then when he shows the shark, it's only in very select places, right? And Spielberg says that this made the movie way better. I have seen a number of interviews where he has talked about this, and he says that made the movie way better because he was just going to show the shark a lot. And he said this actually creates suspense in the audience that we don't see the shark. And of course, I mean, we get the amazing soundtrack from John Williams, right? To really build that tension. We don't see the shark, but we know it's coming. We start hearing that music. We're like, oh no, guys, get out of the water. And so he says this made the movie better, that you didn't see the shark until towards the end. He says that made the movie better. And I think so. I agree with that. But it is interesting how maybe like movie sentiment or, you know, has changed, because I remember a number of years ago reading an article, and it was by a couple of the Sci-Fi Channel executives, and they were talking about how they were trying to, you know, acquire movies to show, you know, on Saturday night on their channel during the original movie time. And they said, well, nobody ever shows the creature. It's like you see the creature maybe for a second at the beginning, and then nobody shows the creature until all the way at the end. And they're like, that's dumb. Why do that? We want to see the creature. We want to see the creature all the way through it. And so their sentiment is totally different, right? And I thought that was an interesting counterpoint to when I heard Spielberg talking about that as versus some of the Sci-Fi Channel executives saying, oh, well, we need to see the creature all the way through. And of course, if you watch any of the giant shark movies, especially the ones that are made for the Sci-Fi Channel, what do? They show the creatures all through it, right? The sharks are just all through the movie. Of course, because the CGI doesn't mess up, right? The animatronic shark doesn't mess up. Well, you can show it through the whole thing. As far as a verdict on storytelling, I'm going to go with Spielberg on this one. I think he is absolutely right. I think he was able to create the tension. I think what could be the problem is it is actually very hard to create that tension, right? You need to really know what you're doing. So maybe if you're not Spielberg level and you're directing a shark movie or a movie where, you know, some creature attacks you in the woods, you know, attacks some people in the woods or something, it is hard to maintain that tension while you're not seeing the creature. So Spielberg did it masterfully, right? I mean, it's one of the, you know, obviously it's in the top 50 of movies made all time. I want to kick it up a few notches. So I think he did it a great job. I think the tension is exactly not seeing that shark does build the tension throughout the movie. And I think it was a great, like, happy accident, as maybe Bob Ross would say, right? That the shark didn't work and it made the movie better. But it is interesting just to counterpoint that with how sentiment has changed, maybe in by some, you know, execs at the Sci-Fi Channel who are looking to buy movies. So if you're making a giant shark movie out there, if anybody's making a giant shark movie, show the shark the whole time, and you'll have a better chance of selling it to the Sci-Fi Channel. All right, the beach POV scene. These are just some other storytelling techniques. You know, this is a very, you know, it's a very well-known scene where Brody has really been forced, and he kind of capitulated in keeping the beaches open, right? Even against his better judgment, right? He knows it's the right thing to do. He knows he should keep the beaches closed. He knows that, but he caves, right? He has his weak moment where he caves before the economic pressure that, you know, and the job pressure and all of this that the mayor and some of the others are putting on to him, right? Because what if it's not a big deal? What if it's not a thing? What if it was an isolated incident? What if it's that? But what if it wasn't? Right? And so he wanted to close the beaches, but he capitulates, he gives in, and he says, okay, keep them open, but we're going to watch. He's like, we're going to keep an eye out for shark. And so this scene has been really analyzed a lot in if you study cinema or if you've studied cinema, because it is absolutely brilliant. And it has quite a number of elements to it, right? That Chief Brody has picked a spot here where he can look out and scan the water, right? Because there are people swimming. And so he can look out and scan and see if something happens. And so then he could react, right? He could react and he could stop it quickly. But there are some complications, right? And Spielberg does an amazing job of showing us, of cutting back and forth between Chief Brody's, him sitting in the chair and then his POV of like scanning the water. And he does that by using people walking in front of Chief Brody that almost create a wipe, and then you cut on the movement. Very brilliant scene. And if you watch that scene kind of over again and watch what he's doing, right? You have everybody has on like a different color bathing suit, right? And they walk through and they create a wipe, and he's able to cut back and forth to the POV, the POV of scanning the beach, and then to Brody. So we know that Brody is really watching the beach, because he's got to know, right? He's worried about this. He knows he should have closed the beaches. And so this sequence right here is fantastic. We also get some complications because somebody, right, a man comes over to Brody and kneels down right in front of him and blocks his view of the beach at one point, right? And this is going to create that little tension, that little complication. And this guy, like, he starts talking and the volume is played low. He's talking about like, parking spaces or some business stuff. And you can totally, it's played like, well, Chief Brody doesn't care anything about what this man is saying. This man is talking useless stuff, and he's blocking his view. And so then we get like Chief Brody, like peering over his shoulder, trying to see the beach. And this man is just, rambling on about, like, I could use some help with the police, with my business. Oh, I think this could happen. And we're not even listening to the guy, right? Because we're Chief Brody. We're like, look at the beach, look at the beach. So Spielberg gives us that little complication just to kind of increase the tension even more. And I think that's a great touch. And then, of course, here at the end of this sequence, right, we get what's sometimes called a stretch, right? This is where you either dolly the camera in while zooming out, or you dolly the camera out while zooming in. And this creates that effect of the person's face kind of staying in the middle, but their whole surroundings distort around them. And this kind of creates the idea of the whole world is crashing down. Reality is distorting around this person. And of course, what is it? It's like, oh my gosh, there's a shark, right? The shark. I knew it was here. Brody's reality is like collapsing and distorting around him, because here it is. Here is the thing he fears right here. And so that cinematic technique was a great choice here. I mean, it was a choice of a master. I'm laying it on a little thick, but I think it's absolutely true. It was just a great choice right here. The next thing, I called it the slip. And this is very subtle. But at one point when Hooper and Brody and Quint are all on the orca out here and they're hunting the shark, and we see the shark is in the water. We know the shark is near the boat. They all spring into action, right? They all just spring into action, and it's like Quint's like, do this, do that, do this. And they all spring into action, and they run. Hooper and Brody have to climb up on the outside here, right? This is a great choice too. They have to climb up on the outside of the wall of the cabin and walk along the railing right there so they can get to the front of the boat. That was a great choice. Why? Because they're They're standing on the edge, right? The shark is right below them. But then Spielberg gives us even just to push the tension even higher. One of them slips, right? The foot, I think it's Hooper, the foot just slips. And then he grabs back on and he goes like nothing happened. But the foot just slipped off is it called a gunwale or the railing around the ship? I can't remember. Um, um, and that slip, right? It is just another shocking moment, just another little thing to push the tension through the roof, right? Because you're like, the shark's in the water. Oh my gosh, they got to go around the side of the boat over the water. Oh, one of them slipped, right? It just adds more tension. And it's just such a simple thing, right? It did not cost an extra dollar to have, an actor's foot slip like that, right? It didn't cost anything. It wasn't a special effects shot to add to the movie. It wasn't anything like that. It wasn't even a camera trick like the stretch or whatever, right? It wasn't even a cinematic technique. It was just when you run over there, your foot slips, and the audience goes crazy, right? Because I've watched the movie with people, and when that slip happens, even though I know it's coming because I've watched the movie tons and tons of times, people are like, don't slip, right? The shark's in the water. It is just such just a really interesting moment right there when Spielberg added that. It is just so good. So good. All right. Here is just a list of some elements that I wanted to pull out. Again, these are just some elements that happened during the movie. And just again, thinking about maybe our own writing or our games when we run a session, when we're organizing an adventure, or we're putting together a campaign and we're running a session and we're thinking about, how can I tell a story? How can I tell a story effectively? So these are just some things that I was, noticing that all kind of, that are just, things that just really help the story and really push things to the limit, right? Okay, so you have a killer shark. So that's scary, right? There's a shark and it's a killer, right? It's a man-eater. That's scary. Well, it's not too scary for me sitting in, the Midwest, right? Sitting in Missouri. That's not too scary. But if I was on an island town, okay, well, killer shark, I'll stay, maybe I could stay away, but I'm still on an island. So at some point, I've got to go across the shark's territory, right? We get this idea of like close the beaches, right? And this conflict that goes around, closing the beaches. So the sheriff, right, Chief Brody, right, he knows what the best thing to do is. He knows the right thing to do. But we're going to have conflict, right? That's going to create a conflict. So when we're creating our stories, when we're running our games, when we're running our campaigns in Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, okay, you got some kind of monster. Well, what would up the tension for that monster? What if you put it on an island? What if it's in a mountain? What kind of creature is it? Think about those things. What would up the tension for that? Then you can give the player something. It's just like they know they ought to do something, but then add pressures into that, right? Because, what's like the next one, right? Well, you got to keep them open, people's livelihoods. What are we going to do? And we create that kind of tension there. Also a jump scare, right? We get a jump scare with the head underwater and stuff, right? We get some other victims and we get that jump scare. You can put jump scares in your campaign, especially if you're running a horror campaign. You can also put in jump scares that aren't really scary, right? Seeing, a shark attack victim would be scary, but you can put things in where it's, it's somebody, the door flies open and everybody jumps and it was the cat or, or a dog running through, and you can put those things in to keep people a little on edge, a little different. Then you got the tension of keeping the beach open. You also get false alarms, right? You get the kids with the fin, you get false alarms. So there are false alarms that can be used in that as well. And then, of course, right, like sadly, we got a needless death, right? We get this death that didn't have to happen because the beaches should have been closed. And then that leads to it leads to bounty hunters, right? A bounty's placed on the shark. Well, this causes all kinds of chaos, right? Because now you have weekend boaters and people who are, out to party, but they're in the water trying to shoot the shark. And now you have more people in the water, which is what the sheriff doesn't want, right? He wanted less people in the water. Well, now you have more people, and some of them are goofy, right? Some of them are acting crazy. They're not professionals. They're drinking, they're doing all these things. They're throwing dynamite into the water, whatever. They're doing all this stuff, and they're causing all this problems, and then of course, right, the hero gets blamed, even though, the hero caved. He should have kept the beaches closed. He did cave, but it was the mayor's fault, right? The mayor did all this stuff, but the mayor doesn't get blamed, right? The Chief Brody gets blamed because but he capitulated, so he knows he's not totally innocent here. He did cave in to the mayor's pressure, but why doesn't the mayor get blamed, right? Why doesn't that happen? The threat is falsely averted. This is always a good one, right? The bounty hunters bring in a big shark. They bring in a big shark, and it's like, maybe that was it, right? Maybe that was the shark. Maybe that was it. We got it. Shark's gone, open beaches, business back, normal. Everything's normal. But of course, that wasn't the shark, right? That was an unusually big shark for the area, but it wasn't it, right? It wasn't the main threat. And so we have to do it again, right? And so the hero is proved right. Beaches should have been closed, not the right shark. There's another shark out there. Finally proved right. Final confrontation, right? You get this big final confrontation between, your party and the big creature or the villain or whatever it is, right? So you have this big final confrontation, and it's all kind of satisfying along the way, right? All right. Well, that is a lot of what I had there. We have about 14 minutes left. I really would like to take some questions and have a little bit of discussion. Maybe let us know what you like about Jaws, if you've seen it, and what are some things that you enjoy about it. You can let me know if I was off base someplace and let me know something about that. But yeah, feel free in chat to type out any questions. I'd love to talk for another 14, 13 minutes. I love talking about Jaws or movies. So please type in some questions, and I'll wait for some to come in, and I'll get a drink here. So any thoughts or anything? What's your favorite moment in Jaws? Am I right? Is Jaws, should it be moved higher than 48 on the AFI's list? Am I totally wrong about that? Any thoughts or anything? All right. How big was the animatronic shark? It was really big. It was really big. I don't know exactly, but I think it was like 20, 25 feet long. It was huge for an animatronic beast, right? I think it was definitely over 20 feet. It was very big, but I don't know exactly. How much influence do you think Hitchcock had on Jaws? That's an interesting question. I mean, he probably, Hitchcock probably had an influence, because I know, Spielberg is a student of cinema, right? Spielberg is an absolute student of cinema. He screens everything. I am sure that Spielberg was thinking about Hitchcock using different techniques to create suspense. I would almost be sure of that, but I don't know exactly, because I have never, heard, Spielberg exactly say that or read anything about that. But you would have to think that some of Hitchcock's techniques really influenced him there, because, well, of course, Hitchcock is called what? The father of suspense, right? So, and with Spielberg being such a student of cinema, I think it probably did have an influence, even if he hasn't talked about it. Any other questions? Oh, the animatronic shark, by the way, was named Bruce. I think I forgot to mention that. That's become kind of famous. It was the crew and Spielberg, they named it Bruce. And you will see things like cartoons and things. I was just my kids are still pretty young, and we were watching a Bob the Builder where they were in an aquarium and the shark in the aquarium is named Bruce. And so obviously the makers of Bob the Builder are cinema fans and movie fans, and they named the shark Bruce. And I was laughing, and my kids are like, why is dad laughing that the shark is named Bruce? All right, here's another one. I like that they didn't make the shark roar in the later movies. That's kind of funny. Yes, at the end, well, what's kind of interesting is at the end, when here we see the picture here of Brody, after he kills the shark and the shark is sinking, sound design, they did put in a roar of a dinosaur, an old roar of a dinosaur from some of the old monster movies. And there's a roar of a dinosaur when the shark is dead and it's sinking. Yes, and you may say that you like that they didn't make it roar in the later movies, but in Jaws 4, it's personal now. Okay. All right. Okay, so somebody says my favorite moment is when they are comparing scars. It is an important bonding moment. Oh my goodness, yes. When Brody, Hooper, and Quint are down in like the galley area of the Orca, and they are comparing scars. I should have probably pulled that scene out to talk about as well. That scene is incredible. It is a great bonding moment, right? Because we've had tension, and we're going to have even more tension between all of them, right? Like Quint doesn't want him to call for help. Hooper thinks it should be done this way. Quint is this way. All all this tension between them. But now here we have these three guys. They have the same goal, and they're bonding over the scars, right? And they're talking about their scars. And of course, then we get to the amazing sequence where Quint reveals that he was on the USS Indianapolis, right? I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that Robert Shaw, actor Robert Shaw, who played Quint, suggested that, and then that was written into the script based on his suggestion. Because if we know the story, right, the Indianapolis was sunk, right? Quint tells it beautifully in the movie, right? And it sank, but the mission was so secret that they had to stay in the water, and there were sharks in the water. And so this gives Quint also, talk about a background story for Quint, right? That he just gets this story that he was on the Indianapolis, and his whole life is kind of revolved around sharks, right? There's always a shark. There's always a giant shark. And it's fitting, of course, that it's fitting in a certain way, in a morbid way, maybe, that here, a shark is going to be his undoing, because in some ways he's almost looking for it, right? He breaks the radio, right? He does some of these things that are not rational, and it puts him in a position to almost say, like, well, my time came, and of course it was a shark that did it. And yes, we do get a little comment here about those sequels. Ugh, yes. The sequels are not Jaws 1 quality, right? The sequels did not hold up. It is interesting that I think that it's one of the problems is that Jaws is so good that it's like, how do you top it, right? Like, how do you make a sequel that's going to be anywhere near it? So I mean, 2 is passable, but it's the same story. 3 is 3 is 3. It's in 3D. um and it's watchable. I remember watching it fairly recently. I can see some of the flaws, but I watched it when I was a teenager and I thought it was pretty good. 4. Oh, 4. It's got Michael Caine in it. It's got Michael Caine in it, and that's what I'm gonna say, because hey, he's like one of the greatest living actors, so that's what it's got. But yeah, the sequels, not so much. Don't maintain the quality of the first one. Of course, I mean, how do you beat the first one, right? Well, we got about 5 minutes left. Any other questions? About Jaws, or about the storytelling, or am I off base saying I think it should be higher than 48 on the list? I mean, there's some great movies on that list, the AFI's list. All right, so somebody says top 10 for sure. I would almost have to say that as well. It's just like, okay, well, if you can't put it at number one, man, it's super high. It's super high on the list, because it is just so well made from beginning to end. And it just pulls you along, right? And it's such a it's just, I don't know, maybe it gets a bad rap, but it's just such a crowd pleasing movie as well, right? It just makes we go from despair to joy to horror to terror. I mean, we just go up and down through this whole movie, right? Like, this just pulls out a range of emotions from us, something that I think, frankly, say like Citizen Kane doesn't pull out of people, even though technically the cinema work behind Citizen Kane, and the writing in Citizen Kane is top notch, no problem, no disagreement there. But I mean, Jaws just pulls you around, right? I mean, you feel everything, right? You feel compassion, you feel love, you feel joy and terror, and it just brings you around. Yeah, okay, so we got somebody else. Yeah, top 10. Somebody else. Yeah, we got like 4 minutes left. Anything else? Do a lot of you guys consider Jaws to be like one of your favorite movies, or do you have some other movies that are favorites? I would say, it's certainly in my top 5 of all-time favorite movies, but I do like some other movies maybe just a little bit better because I saw them at a certain age or something like that. But I think Jaws, in the way of filmmaking, Jaws is superior to even some of the movies I might call my favorite movie or something like that. All right, well, we got like 3 minutes left. If there's any other questions. All right, so somebody says, yeah, definitely one of my favorites. It's from that golden era with Star Wars, Raiders. Absolutely. Those are some of my favorite movies as well, right? That era right there, that late 70s, early 80s, something was going on, man. Something was in the water. Of course, Raiders is by Spielberg as well. And of course, Raiders is on the AFI's top 100 list as well, because Raiders of the Lost Ark is amazing. Okay, another question came in. This is interesting. Yeah, have you seen Duel by Spielberg? Yes, the television movie Duel starring Dennis Weaver. Yes, I've absolutely seen that. I own it on DVD. Duel is a great movie, based on a Richard Matheson short story, I believe. Duel is a great movie. It is a great example of some of Spielberg's early work. I think the dinosaur roar is used in Duel 2 when the truck crashes, because there's a truck with like a mysterious driver that's like stalking and chasing Dennis Weaver, our hero guy. And when the truck goes over the cliff, I think that same dinosaur roar is used when the truck is crashing, if I'm remembering that right. And so the sound design carried that over and used it in Jaws. Pardon me. But Duel is a great film. It was a TV movie. Spielberg, of course, started out directing television. He got his contract when he was like 20 years old or something, and directed his first one when he was like 21. And then he directed a few television movies. He directed some episodes. One was Night Gallery, but then he didn't direct after that for a while. And then he directed some Columbo, and he directed like 4 or 5 or 6 maybe television movies. And Duel was one of those, and Duel is absolutely great. And then Jaws was his second theatrical feature. His first one was Sugarland Express, which is a good movie in its own right. Well, thank you. Somebody says another great movie panel by you. When is your next one? My next one is later today. I'm looking at the spaghetti westerns of Sergio Leone. Um, uh, and that is, I think it's 4 o'clock my time, but 5 o'clock Eastern. So I think it's 5 o'clock Eastern. So yeah, so that is my next movie panel, and we'll be talking about westerns and Sergio Leone. Just a few seconds left until we got a full hour. Any other questions real quick? Or I really hope you guys appreciated this. I just wanted to talk about Jaws, and I just wanted to talk about this. Well, thank you. So some good thanks coming in. There are some great documentaries and great behind the scenes stuff. The 25th anniversary DVD has amazing interviews with Spielberg talking about some of the making of this stuff. I'm sure there are documentaries on YouTube and stuff as well, because I think a lot of people recognize that Jaws is something special and something unique. All right, well, there we have an hour. Thank you so much for joining today. I do have a couple other seminars coming up, so I need the break. But thank you so much for joining today. It was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.